everyone, I'm Mia,
And I'm Sydney.
and welcome back to Fixing the Fog. If you're new here, this is a podcast where we break down misinformation and talk about how it spreads, why it works, and how it impacts people both online and offline. We focus a lot on the psychology behind misinformation, not just the facts, because understanding why something spreads is just as important as knowing whether it's true or not.
This week, we focus on conspiracies, what they actually are, why people believe them, how they spread, and how they can impact mental health.
Conspiracies are everywhere online right now, and they often get dismissed as just being weird or extreme. But the reality is, conspiracy thinking is deeply connected to psychology, emotion, and uncertainty. When we ignore that, we miss why these beliefs are so powerful and why they're so hard to let go of.
So today's episode is basically a full breakdown of conspiracies. We're going to walk through everything step by step and connect it all together.
Let's start with the basics, because definitions matter. What is a conspiracy, and how is it different from just being skeptical or curious?
At its core, a conspiracy is the belief that a group is secretly working together to control events, hide the truth, or deceive the public. Think about people who believe that the moon landing was faked, or that Area 51 is a secret military base for experiments in aliens.
And something important we talked about this week is that not all conspiracies are automatically false. Some real conspiracies have existed historically, which is part of why conspiracy theories can feel believable.
But modern conspiracy theories usually lack evidence, rely on speculation, and are almost impossible to disprove because of how outlandish they are. Basically, there's no data that disproves the theories because they're so unlikely that nobody has bothered to properly research them.
They often explain complex events as intentional instead of complicated, and they usually include the idea that they don't want you to know this, which immediately frames information as hidden or forbidden.
People who subscribe to these ideas usually feel like they've beat the system and know some secret that they shouldn't know. This makes people feel smarter and more special, since in their minds, they've cracked a code and have an advantage over the rest of the population.
One of the biggest parts of this week was comparing conspiracies to facts, because they're not the same thing, even though they sometimes sound similar at first. Understanding that difference is key to critical thinking.
Facts are based on evidence that can be tested, verified, and challenged. They're open to revision when new information comes out.
Conspiracies, on the other hand, often resist correction. Any evidence against them is framed as fake, controlled, or part of the cover-up, which makes them feel staged and untrustworthy even when they're not.
Facts ask you to verify. Conspiracies ask you to believe.
And emotionally, conspiracies tend to rely on fear, anger, or distrust, while factual information usually tries to reduce emotional bias instead of increasing it.
One of the most important points from this week is that people don't believe conspiracies because they're unintelligent.
Exactly. Conspiracy belief is about psychology, not IQ. Anyone can be vulnerable to these beliefs under the right emotional or social conditions.
A huge factor is the need for certainty. Uncertainty makes people uncomfortable, and these conspiracies offer simple explanations for complicated situations. And in some cases, these simple explanations remove any blame and responsibility from those believing in them.
Another factor is control. When people feel powerless, believing that someone is secretly in control can actually feel way more comforting than accepting chaos or randomness.
There's also identifying and belonging. Conspiracies often create communities where belief equals belonging.
And once belief becomes part of someone's identity, questioning it can feel personal. It doesn't just feel like someone is disagreeing with an idea. It feels like they're attacking who you are.
That's when a belief becomes really hard to change. Joining a crowd makes us feel empowered by what unifies us, making us much more cemented in this idea that brings us together.
Let's talk about how conspiracies actually spread, because most of the time it's not about evidence at all. It's about exposure, emotion, and repetition.
They spread through repetition. The more often people see a claim, the more familiar it feels, and familiarity can feel like truth.
Emotion plays a huge role here. Fear, anger, guilt, and stress all make people more likely to react quickly and share without slowing down.
And social reinforcement matters. When people see others agreeing, sharing, or validating a belief, it feels safer to accept it.
Algorithms also amplify conspiracy content because it's engaging. Emotional content gets more clicks, comments, and shares, which means it travels farther than calm corrections.
And corrections usually spread slower than false claims, which makes stopping misinformation really hard.
One thing we really wanted to clarify this week is the difference between questioning and conspiratorial thinking, because conspiracies often hide behind the phrase, I'm just asking questions.
Questioning is healthy, it's curiosity driven, it's open to evidence and new information.
Conspiratorial thinking looks similar on the surface, but it's very different underneath. Instead of seeking answers, it starts with a conclusion and works backward.
It assumes the truth based on little or no evidence and refuses to listen to other possibilities.
Questioning says, I don't know yet, so I'll keep looking into this. Conspiracies say, I already know the truth, so I don't need to listen to other perspectives. And that mindset changes everything.
And that difference matters because real critical thinking is flexible, not fixed.
We also talked a lot this week about how conspiracies can impact mental health, which is something that doesn't get talked about enough.
While the purpose of a conspiracy is to create a sense of relief, believing conspiracies can actually increase anxiety with mentality that one or more groups are out to get you or trying to keep something important from you.
There's also chronic stress. Constant exposure to fear based narratives keeps the brain in alert mode, which gets exhausting over time. When the brain stays in that fight or flight state for too long, stress hormones remain elevated. That can make people feel on edge, irritable, and mentally drained, even when there's no immediate threat. Over time, this kind of stress makes it harder to think clearly and easier to accept information that feels emotionally validating instead of accurate.
Social isolation is another big issue. These paranoid beliefs can push people away from friends, family, or professionals they no longer trust.
And when conspiracies target mental health specifically, they can discourage people from seeking help or trusting treatment.
If someone is so convinced that everyone is out to hurt them or lie to them, they definitely won't open up about their paranoia to someone who can actually help them out.
That's when believing conspiracies gets seriously dangerous. Mental health conspiracies spread particularly easily because mental health is already misunderstood and stigmatized.
Plus, symptoms aren't always visible, experiences vary. This means that it's not always clear who fits what criteria, and that uncertainty creates space for misinformation.
Also, a lot of disorders only started being researched recently, which means that we don't actually know much about them. Autism and ADHD, for example, were thought to only affect young boys until recently.
With these delays in research and public knowledge, a lot of uncertainty is spread. Uncertainty about where disorders come from, who can be diagnosed with them, and if they're even curable.
A lot of this leads to conspiracies about how therapy is brainwashing, or taking Tylenol during pregnancy makes your child autistic. Nobody likes uncertainty, but we're quick to fill those gaps with anything that makes even a little sense, regardless of the actual evidence.
This act of turning to conspiracies for certainty and comfort is what truly harms communities.
So the big question becomes, what do we actually do about all of this?
The answer isn't arguing with everyone online, it's awareness.
Recognizing emotional triggers, slowing down when something feels extreme, checking sources.
And setting boundaries. Not every post deserves attention, not every claim deserves engagement.
Protecting mental health means protecting emotional energy as well.
If there's one thing we want you to take away from this week, it's this.
Conspiracies aren't just about beliefs, they're about emotions, uncertainty, and psychology.
Understanding why they work makes them much less powerful.
Critical thinking doesn't mean dismissing people, it means slowing down, asking better questions, and choosing evidence over fear.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Fixing the Fog.
We'll be back next week with more conversations about misinformation, mental health, and digital responsibility. Until then, stay curious, stay aware, and keep clearing the clouds with clarity.